Well, it is 12:03. That is my official start time to keep us on schedule. Thank you all for joining us today. So we will jump right in. This is my official start. All right, I am Cheryl Wilson-Griffin, and this is a webinar by Legal Tech Consultants. And we are talking today about the role of the Chief of Staff in a legal organization and how it can really superpower and amplify your executives. And who we have with us today are Mackenzie Lee of Cedar and Carl Morrison of Mod Counsel. And we'll be jumping right in here in just one moment, but just want to give you a quick heads up on other things that we have going on here. So tomorrow we have a session, continuation of our session of AI for Smart People. Tomorrow we are talking about recruiting for law firms, where we're going to get the AI talent that we so desperately will need in the coming year. And then we have sessions upcoming on low-risk use cases for AI. We have a session that I encourage you all to join on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving at lunchtime. Everyone's welcome to bring a beverage if you are so inclined, with Jerry Bowie and Cassie Burns, where we'll be talking about deepfakes, all the crazy stuff those guys are doing on with AI on TikTok and LinkedIn, and all the weird stuff that they're working on with Interpol and everything else. And we just booked, this is just announced, Nikki Shaver will be joining us on the session right after the Thanksgiving holiday. And she's going to be sharing with us insights from across the law firm landscape worldwide. She's been talking to law firms worldwide about what they're really saying about AI behind closed doors. So can't miss sessions. So with that, wanted to really just jump in right away and give Mackenzie and Carl a chance to introduce themselves, and then let's get started on the topic. So Mackenzie, you're in the upper left of my screen, so I'll let you go first. Let's learn about you.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl, for having me. CEO at Cedar, we build leadership systems that make executives super effective, and I have a special focus on the Chief of Staff resource, being a de facto Chief of Staff myself, really seeing the power of executive operations to transform leadership teams, and looking forward to the next hour or so talking about everything related to Chief of Staff.
And Mackenzie, you come through some big organizations. Axiom is one that most people here will recognize, but McKinsey and a couple of others.
Yeah, so Axiom is my connection to the legal industry, and at that time was working with tier 1 banks delivering large-scale solutions, mostly focused on contract negotiation or other types of services. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but I think the rise of legal ops and the rise of trying to find really effective systems to handle legal work is a theme for the reason why people are coming on to the Chief of Staff, within legal organizations. So looking forward to
that. Great. Carl, how about you?
Thank you. Glad to be here. Carl Morrison. I'm Chief of Staff for Mod Counsel. We are a law practice. Think of us as a legal team as a service that provides fractional support to in-house corporate legal departments and law firms. So the whole range. It's our people that do the work. We don't second out. It's our legal operations, attorneys, so on and so forth. And so I've been with Mod Counsel for almost a year now as Chief of Staff. Prior to that, I headed up legal operations for the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas. As a de facto Chief of Staff, started out as a senior paralegal many moons ago, in-house corporate, and transitioned into legal operations, headed up legal operations, and sort of started to segue into that Chief of Staff role. And I'm so excited to be here and share my journey of the Chief of Staff and transitioning from legal operations to it.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. And would love to just share a tidbit on kind of how this session came together, because I think, one, it's a good story of networking, and two, it's a good story of kind of listening and listening to what people are talking about and what's happening. So I didn't know Mackenzie originally. I actually met Mackenzie through Anastasia Boyko, because we were talking about executive enablement and how important it is to make sure the executives have all the information that they need, but not too much information. I met Anastasia through the internet. We all know about the interwebs during the pandemic, and then we finally had a chance to meet at Clock last year. She introduced me to Mackenzie. Carl and I were talking about his new role at ILTACON this year as Chief of Staff, and how he basically was a Chief of Staff in his previous role. And then I kind of said, I think I see something that makes sense here. Mackenzie's talking about bringing chief of staff to legal. Carl is a chief of staff in legal. Why don't we bring this together? And so that's really where this whole thing started. And so I think, Carl, you kind of alluded to it. And so Mackenzie, Carl, either of you can jump in, but let's talk about this idea of people who are already chiefs of staff and don't know it, don't have the title, have all the responsibility and none of the title. Carl, you want to share your experience and what that was like?
Yeah, so we were a small legal department at the Cosmopolitan. We were not part of any of the giant gaming hospitality conglomerates here in Las Vegas. And so we had a small legal team. One GC, me, contracts, paralegal, risk, the whole kit and caboodle, right? There's about 8 of us in total. And so working, heading up legal operations in-house, my role started to evolve, but then I didn't realize I was evolving, right? You're just in the throes of the job and seeing that my responsibilities were growing, right? And starting to do what appeared to be chief of staff. I didn't know what a chief of staff really did. It was maybe last year, Cheryl, David Cowan did a whole series on the chief of staff, legal operations transitioning and chief of staff. So I went through that series and I was like, wait, I've been doing chief of staff. This is everything I've already been doing. This is nothing new, right? And so that de facto chief of staff role and what it is, right? And I know we'll talk about it, so I won't spoil our conversation, but knowing that, wow, I've been doing this for a while and just didn't have the title, right? And so the evolution for me was really recognizing what does a chief of staff do traditionally and taking a self-audit. What skills maybe I'm lacking to, hone in on to perfect being a truly defined chief of staff.
That makes a ton of sense. And then, so Mackenzie, you must see this a lot in your role. So when you run into this, when you're kind of seeing this de facto chief of staff and thinking about somebody saying, hey, I'd like to kind of move into this role, what does the chief of staff look like? What's the day-to-day? What does the chief of staff do generally?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to take a page out of lawyers' books, and it says it depends. It depends, right?
Yeah.
It depends because ultimately the chief of staff is trying to make their CEO or their leader, their principal, super effective, and of course that person has strengths and polish areas or things that they don't want to be doing, and so naturally the chief of staff will fit their roles and responsibilities around their partnership. But I think there are standard things that a chief of staff does, and we've codified them. In my playbook, it's being a strategic advisor, it's being a trusted confidant, something called, I call it like master organizer, director of communications, leadership team, kind of performance coach, and CEO proxy or leader proxy to make decisions on behalf of that leader. And so those are some maybe 7 standard roles that I see with different chiefs. And then of course, there's a sprinkling of other types of things that maybe their leader hates doing. That's not in their zone of genius. So maybe they're really bad at project management, or maybe they're really bad at change management, or they hate comms, or whatever it might be. The chief of staff will take that on, or at least delegate that to other people at the team.
So let's dig into that a little bit more. I mean, what's really the purpose of the chief of staff in the end? How does the chief of staff really enable an executive?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like your CEOs or principals' goals are your goals. So whatever they are, you're trying to amplify and reach that. And the way to do that, I believe, is to create strong systems. So the role of the chief of staff is to create strong systems that make the whole leadership team successful around time management or energy management, systems around project management, change management, anything that has word management in it. But systems help, right, for the sanity of the chief of staff and also the sanity of the leadership teams.
And so when you say systems, we're talking about things like, we said project management, but really making it a recognizable organization where people know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, where they should send stuff, where they can retrieve stuff, kind of making things very predictable.
Absolutely. It's people, process, and technology all integrated together. It's just not a tech solution, obviously.
Right.
But people have to know what they're doing and also be motivated. right? And then follow some simple process to get there.
And Carl, how does that translate into the real world for you? What does that look like kind of in your day to day?
Yeah, so you said the three magic words, right, Mackenzie? So for the legal ops people that may be listening to this webinar, you hear this all the time, right? People, process, technology. That's legal operations. Well, we're just amplifying that to the X degree, right? Because we are, and you said it earlier too, Mackenzie, we're the confidant and the advisor, right? I was and am today, right? Even in my de facto role before with the Cosmopolitan, and today as a chief of staff at Mod Counsel, I am that right-hand person to the senior leadership, right? I am that trusted confidant. I am there to help strategize with them, be the sounding board to them, whether it's a GC, whether it is a CEO, executive managing director, whatever that title is, that senior leader or executive. My role is to actually be able to be that sounding board, help plan and strategize whatever it is, whatever that project is, and then be able to communicate it, be able to oversee it, be able to delegate and manage it so that my executive can go worry about everything else, right? They can go deal with the other more pressing issues than getting bogged down into the minutia of that particular project, right? And so setting with the GC, I always like to say at that time, I was the gatekeeper, right? And not just for the legal department, for the leaders within the legal department, it was also with the business units, right? So gaming hospitality, I used to say, it's like working for 7 different companies because you have food and beverage, you have marketing, you have hotel, it's all of it, right? And so being able to take the strategy for legal and be able to communicate it out across the enterprise. Well, now I don't do that for 7 companies. I do it for 1 company. I am the right-hand person to the CEO, but it's the same thing. I'm doing the same thing. Now I just have that title, right? And be able to push out, communicate, manage, oversee, so that, again, my executive doesn't get caught up in the minutia. There's a caveat, though. You can get sucked into the vortex, right? And you may ask this question later, Cheryl. Again, I don't want to spoil what you may be asking, but you can get caught into it and find yourself doing things or getting embedded within a business unit, within a arm of the company that, wait, this is not my job. This is not, I'm here to delegate and you do this. I'm moving on, right?
Yep.
So, well, let's talk a little bit about that. I think that's a really great transition. Let's think about, Mackenzie, what are kind of core competencies and skills that we see that work really well with the chief of staff role? Because saying no seems like one of the skills that you need to have, right?
Yeah, just saying like, this is not worth the time or the energy, or I can't do this, so I'm going to push it back on you. Empowering the team to execute, being like, okay, great idea. Let's do something about it. Saying no is really important. Time management, energy management. There's burnout happening all over the place with chiefs of staff. Like this is happening everywhere. Obviously at the leadership side, C-suite burnout, but then chief of staff burnout is real, you know? So those 3, and then, you know, good hygiene around project management, program management, change management. And the flip side, obviously, if you're a good director of comms, then you have to do good, you know, kind of communication internally and then also externally. Those are some common, you know, experiences or skills that you see with successful chiefs. Also selfishly thinking about your own development path and getting what you need in the moment. I kind of joke, it's like the Matrix scene where, you know, you just download something to be able to fly a helicopter after never been doing before. Like you have to be able to like go on YouTube, watch a 5-minute video and just like do that thing like immediately. So being able to be in control of your development path and then think about your succession plan and exit opportunities. Like chiefs are not really thinking about that because they're running around, but very successful chiefs are thinking about where does this get me in terms of being embedded in the organization or exiting to a director level role.
Well, I was going to ask the follow-up question. Where do chiefs of staff go to after they either leave the company or get promoted? Where do they go next? What's next?
Yeah, Carl, feel free to chime in here. You can become a director level, obviously, maybe a new business unit that's been opened or a new initiative that needs more people around it. You can become sometimes a COO or take on a C-suite position. You can become a consultant or an investor. A lot of folks are becoming founders after becoming chiefs of staff because you have that VC relationship and you know the market and what the white space is. So those are some exit opportunities that we see.
Carl, what are you thinking about?
Mackenzie, you said it. I've not really been thinking about the next step, right? Because you get caught up this year alone. There's so much that we've done as a company that it's like, wait, I'm worrying about this. Okay, tomorrow I'm worrying about that. And I'm not necessarily thinking about now. Me as a master planner in my own personal life, I constantly in the back of my head, I'm trying to think 2 steps ahead. What happens, right? I'm still young enough. I got a long career still ahead of me. I'm not, retiring next year type of deal. And so it's like, where do I go from here? So yeah, in the back of my mind, it's now, I now set as a chief of staff in that executive level, right? Because I am that right hand to the C-suite, right? And so my goal and role and what I should be thinking about is where do I go, right? Because who knows, right? You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. And it is, right? You mentioned about director, right? Which is a great transition. I will tell you the imposter syndrome that we all suffer when you said a CEO role. My first, and I'm not kidding, Mackenzie, my first reaction was like, oh, God, wait, yeah, exactly. Wait, that's a big one. Is it really that big of a step, right? Every job I've ever had in my career, as I continue to grow professionally, did I ever think that, oh God, I can't do that role? And then all of a sudden you're in that role and you're like, wait, I can do this role. And it's to that point, right? That you just continue to grow. And it may be within a company or moving out into a consulting type role, right? That's a step personally, professionally, but
I mean,
okay.
I was gonna say, a lot of chiefs are really burned out after tour of duty. So is it smart to actually try to go straight up to CEO, C-suite, right? Maybe you want to have a little bit of a decompression time as a director or as a consultant and then come back into the mix. That's what I counsel chiefs as they're thinking about their exit plan. And then on the succession planning piece, the best practice is that you have a high performance program internally that you're scanning saying, hey, all these folks could be the next chief. And that's what you're kind of dangling in front of them too, because it's an amazing opportunity. Retain them, you get them more leadership development, you define the succession plan, you have the exit for the chief, and then you're moving the chief into positions of power or leadership to further retain them and develop them. That's like the whole life cycle. And that's what I'm doing right now with the client. But it's pretty meaty. And that's really where you have this full program around chiefs of staff and executive enablement.
Sounds like a high quality organization you're working with.
Yes, well, they're gonna pay money. They're gonna they really value their people, right? And it's a competitive advantage for them, and they have it stated in their principles, and they're gonna put money against it.
So as we're thinking about, right, so we're talking about Carl's in, a legal department, right? But thinking about, I've been in IT organizations at big law firms where we've in the past talked about things like creating the office of the CIO, which the chief of staff is kind of the natural evolution of that, right? And where you have, 125, 150 person IT department, right? And especially where you have innovation teams kind of glommed onto there, and now AI and other things happening. Where, thinking about legal in general, where are other places where the chief of staff role makes sense besides legal departments and legal ops teams? Mackenzie, I'll throw that to you.
Sure. I mean, we share a smart client. I mean, like legal tech CEOs, obviously, that's one. you know, in-house CLO, GC. That's two. I put up two fingers, but
We're making buckets, so
I'm
yeah.
just making new math out here. And then you know, you said CIOs at large, you know, law firms. Those are some of the, you know, usual suspects.
Have you seen either COOs or managing directors at
Yes.
law firms bring on chief of staff? Because I've seen them have executive assistants, but that's not exactly the same role, right?
It's like this de facto thing, you know. It's like
Right.
how it's like
Sometimes.
all the work has to get done, and then you're like you're looking around, you're like, who can do this thing for me? So you're big borrowing and stealing from the EA or, you know, the practice manager or, you know, whoever, and it's kind of cobbled together, but maybe not in one resource. But these activities are happening without the title, without the sponsorship, right, and the commitment from the firm to the office of, you know, that's my take.
Or they're not happening, and
or it's not happening too.
the organization isn't executing quite at the level that they could be, right? So they're underperforming. They're not meeting kind of what they could be, right? Their potential.
Yeah, and we all know this. There's definitely a conservative streak within the legal industry, and I have my own battle scars trying to advance innovation at tier 1 banks. Very conservative folks. You know, the buyers at GC, by the way, and they're personally very risk averse. And so getting them to come around and saying, hey, you know, you could be part of an innovative project that changes the nature of the firm. Usually this is folks that have a vested interest in them being seen as forward thinking at the firm. They're going to be a champion rather than partners who are maybe on their sunset years, right? They're like, why change anything? Like, this is working. Like, I'm making money, the firm's making money, like, whatever, you know.
Well, I think that's a really good transition too. How do we identify, let's say you're a leader and you're looking around and going, well, my executive team is maybe like strapped for energy. How do I decide who I should be considering to give a chief of staff or assign a chief of staff to? Who are the right folks for that to get that type of role underneath them? That was a terribly asked question. I'm sorry. I can't help it. We can't execute well on all of them.
I followed you, Cheryl.
Carl, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so problem solving, right? Having someone that is and not everyone has that superior level of problem solving, but has that gift of being able to problem solve on the fly, problem solve effectively and efficiently, right? You can problem solve and it takes you 2 years to solve the problem when you could have done it in 2 weeks, right? But it's also someone that is an issue spawner, right? That is constantly how I operate. And I'm not saying I'm the end all be all, but how I operate is I'm always, my left eye is always looking and seeing this is an issue, right? And not just turning that blind eye to it and then walking away and going, well, someone else will deal with it, right? It's going, well, this is an issue and it affects these 3 operations or systems within the company. And it affects 2 out of the 3 in a very risky situation. And so this is an issue, I've got to deal with it or bring it up to the individual, right? So it's someone that can issue spot, someone that can problem solve, and someone that's a great communicator, right? And not just vocal communication, but also the written communication, right? Being able to succinctly and effectively be able to communicate the message quickly to the individual or the department or the team, right? To me, those are like 3 core skills that if you're looking to hone in on someone to mentor and grow them, look for those individuals that have those type of skill sets, because that's what I leaned on transitioning into the true chief of staff role, was that I already had it, right? And so it was a natural fit for me growing. I don't know, Mackenzie, what you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, you know, bias towards action and really being a workhorse, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's just like, if you think a CEO has 100 tasks, then a chief of staff has 1,000 tasks, because all the 100, 900 on the 1,000 task list of the CEO is being pushed away. So someone who can just really get it done, bias towards execution, next steps, like really just taking it along. That's what I would add to the three you mentioned, Carl.
And you probably have scared everybody off when you said CEO has 100 tasks and the chief of staff has 1,000. I was like, yeah, I do have 1,000 tasks, right? It's like, wait, that laundry list, but being able to manage, right?
Yes.
List of tasks, right? I use the old school Eisenhower matrix and figuring out, okay, what is urgent and needs to be done now? What is urgent and can be delegated? What can be totally wiped off my list, right? And bucketing and figuring out, I have an amazing EA. So every morning we have a huddle where we go through my matrix and I need you to deal with these things, Gail. These are the things that are urgent I've got to deal with today. If I didn't have that, if I didn't keep organized, how could I keep my CEO organized, right? They're going to come to me. Where are we at on, I don't know. So to your point, yeah.
Yes, and because you understand, the sensitivity around some of this information, or you understand exactly where the CEO is going or the company is going, you have to be discreet and trustworthy. This is a quality obviously every leader should have, but particularly within the chief of staff, it's a highly intimate relationship between you and your CEO or leader. You will know all these personal details, by the way, about your leader. And so that intimacy is the reason why when I tell CEOs looking to hire, you got to make this match right and you got to make it work. So that characteristic, super, super important because you're trusting your life. Sometimes you just show all your email and all your personal accounts, appointments to this chief of staff. So secrecy and, discreetness, very important here.
You hit the nail on the head with the one word relationship, right? It's a relationship between the executive GC CEO and the chief of staff because it's so intimate, right? You do see and know so much because you are that trusted advisor. You're that trusted confidant. And mental health for us chief of staff's important, right? Because we are carrying that burden along with them. So us taking care of ourselves are important as well as trying to take care of our leader.
Mm-hmm.
So to that point, and the idea of a workforce, is the chief of staff typically a 9-to-5 job?
I don't know if you say anything more, but
well, no. Next question.
So you're carrying a lot of water, let's say, along the way, but it's really when we talked a little bit before the call, we talked about finding a role that's kind of right for you and targeting, not just applying for every chief of staff role on earth, that's something that you're looking for. Can we talk a little bit about that, Mackenzie? Kind of how you advise people on that?
I say target boss company and role, and really do all the questions underneath that. Carl was talking about relationship, and so you got to think about your principal. You're spending all this time with this person. You're going to know all these details, and they're going to know all your details. So thinking about the type of boss you want, so important. Obviously, important every manager IC relationship, but particularly in this one because you are so intimate. And so what that looks like is thinking about their temperament, like thinking about whether they have kids or not, what kind of hours they hold. Are you hybrid or remote? Are you on site? Are you expect to be right next to the side? Are you flying on a jet with them? Like whatever it looks like, define that. And then you can be much more confident when you go into the interview, by the way, because, I've selected you because you fit this target profile because I know I work really well with these people. And we can have a successful partnership and relationship together.
I love that, targeting the boss and really understanding what makes them tick, and also their skill set, right? Like if you see somebody that maybe leans really hard on the financial side and you have a different skill set.
Yes, that's your value prop. It's like, I know you hate financial models, but I worked at Goldman, so we can be the most amazing pair. That will get you the job versus all these, generic consultants out there. If you really hone in on what their, zone of incompetence is, and figure out conversely what their zone of genius is, then you can be that right partner to them.
And Carl, have you experienced that firsthand, kind of places where you and your GC kind of yin and yang together really nicely?
Yeah, absolutely. You said it, Mackenzie. Financial. My boss, my CEO, Ronak, is the financial whiz, right? He's a lawyer, but his undergrad was economics, right? So he is that financial whiz, but he is not an operations person at all. Zero. God bless him. And he completely, shifts that to me. But I am able to be that sponge and learn so much from him from the finance, economic side of operating a business that I didn't have working with a GC in-house corporate legal, right? Because I've got someone that has that yin and yang. We fit really well because I complement in those skills and those areas that he doesn't have the expertise in, and I'm able to learn from him in the areas that I don't have expertise in. And so we're talking about looking for that perfect relationship. It made me think about if only there was a dating app for chief of staffs to find their C-suite individual they're going to work for.
Check back here in like 3 months. Mackenzie will be launching that product on our next webinar.
Well, you're hitting on these themes, which I think is like, why do this chief of staff thing at all, right? Like, what are you going to get out of this selfishly? Do you want that mentorship advisory? Do you want that exposure to skills that are outside your wheelhouse, like financial, modeling, for example, Carl? That's implicitly what you are entering into in this relationship. We know that mentorship and advisor relationships are few and far between these days, by the way. Like, companies are not doing this at scale. Like, it's just people are changing jobs all the time. Like, this type of relationship doesn't exist. But it does exist within the chief of staff and the CEO relationship. They're implicitly saying, I'm going to take a bet on you. I'm going to show you everything I know. In exchange, I'm going to take a lot of your horsepower and your energy, and move you along and skip level you across different levels, so that you can reach your career goals.
Yep.
I love that. So Mackenzie, you were talking a little bit before when we spoke earlier about your let go and do more approach, and would love to kind of hear you talk a little bit about that, because I just think I love the tagline, number one, but I think it's such a great concept.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just like, if we didn't learn anything from the pandemic about how overstressed or overworked we are, or how many things we have, like we have failed as a society. Do we need to go through another mega pandemic to really think about how to change the way that leaders operate today? So, I think what we hopefully learned through the pandemic is we need to let go in order to do more. Let go of things that don't serve us and do more of the things that matter. There's just going to be thousands of requests for a leader's time, which has been enabled by technology or a DM or email. So we have to really simplify, minimalize. That's a new term, by the way. Think about how to let go and do more. And so that's my whole shtick around systems building. If we build the right systems to let go and do more, then we can let go and do more at scale. Mm-hmm. So letting go means just delegating, like workload optimization, like all those good practices, looking at the bench so you understand who to delegate to as well. And then do more. It's like really identify strategic things that matter using the Eisenhower matrix that Carl was talking about. Really coming back to the task list and project list, ruthlessly saying no to things. We're also in 2023 of do more with less. So, how are we doing more with less? We have to be ruthlessly, looking at the list and really shedding things that don't serve us. So let go, do more, and achieve that with systems.
And I think too, sometimes it's just crossing it off the list entirely. And that is the thing that I think people have the hardest time doing. It's like, it's not parking it for later. It's just gone.
Right.
Right.
Recognizing to let go, but allowing yourself to grieve the loss, right? To go, this project, as much as I wanted to do this, is not going to benefit me or anyone else in the business. As much as I love it, I have to let it go and recognize I've lost it. but move on, heal, and move on.
It's like Marie Kondo, she
Huh?
says you go into your garage and you find some things and you say, thank you, and then you put it into the donate bin. And so you acknowledge what that meant to you in the moment, but then know that you're a different part of your life. So same idea with these projects, these maybe pet projects. When we have to say thank you next, which is also Ariana Grande. How do we say thank you next? Move on.
Be the session that's got the most pop culture references in it. A plus, A plus. And we're not done yet. We still have plenty of time to get more in. So
Got more.
way to go. I love it. So, Carl, one of the things you talked about when we met a week or so ago was the idea of, as the chief of staff, helping legal stop being a cost center and really focusing on protecting revenue. So just kind of the way the chief of staff can change the state of play really for a legal organization. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm going to say it this way. When I was working head of legal operations and de facto chief of staff with the GC, and now chief of staff with CEO for a company, it's the same principle, right? The chief of staff role, it doesn't matter if I'm working with business units or the company itself, I'm looking and paying attention to costs that are not just within my four walls, right? Especially when you're working in-house corporate and your chief of staff to the CLO or the GC, right? You may be shielded or blinded from financially what's going on in the other business units, right? And you're hyper focused on creating the best budget to protect the revenue, but you're blind, right? And I will say, right, 100% at fault, the same when I was in-house. Transitioning to company now, law practice, I now see even more so, right, of protecting the revenue for the company across every aspect, right? And so it's not just the legal costs and legal expenses, it is the company as a whole. And so you can't be that blind in-house corporate. You should be paying attention to the finances around the other business units, right? Because you should be trying to figure out, how can I help not just legal, but what legal tasks and duties and services within the company can I help food and beverage, right? Streamline their cost that they're dealing with as well to protect the revenue for the company as a whole.
It just reminds me a lot from, my Axiom days where we talk about how to, extract data from contracts, put into a database and really give visibility into all the business lines. And, we're not just looking at risk, we're looking at, revenue generation or white space opportunity, right? So really using the legal document as a way to unlock better insights to drive action in those business units. I helped implement a contract management system and analysis for a Fortune 100 company. And then we're like, okay, here's all the money you can make, because you're leaving it on the table. You sold these products to these clients, but you don't have these products installed. Just upsell them, and so the sales team was like, oh, this is amazing. This is amazing insight, right? And obviously the legal contract is the contract of record, the thing that you actually sold, is sometimes even better data than the CRM because it's the actual thing that you inked and then signed, right? So you have the real deal, right? In your hands. And so going back to the rest of the business units, and then you have to educate them okay, don't see them as a cost center. I can actually help you and be a strategic partner,
right,
and I can help you make more money.
Right.
Your goal, then they're like, oh my God, no, I never thought of legal that way. I always thought them as a risk management center and cost center or a naysayer, right? So it's really changing the relationship you have with those business leaders and then showing them the way, showing them the path.
That's what we did.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that was one of the things that I did going on into in-house, right? Is help change the culture and mindset, because the legal department, everybody was afraid to go to anyone in legal, including the GC. And it was like, ooh, legal is scary. And I'm like, I put my pants on just like the rest of you guys, right? I
Yes.
want you as the business leader to always feel free. My door is 100% open, right? And because I work to the right hand of the GC, I have his ear constantly. So
Absolutely.
you don't feel comfortable going to him, come to me, right? And it wasn't just trying to short circuit risks, but it's also looking for those opportunities to grow and find the money that's sitting on the table, right?
Mhm.
Within the contracts, changing the contract itself, right, for group sales at the Cosmopolitan. And it wasn't just a risk issue. It was like, why are we leaving so much money on the table? Well, salespeople, they're just trying to get the money in. They're not trying to look to see how they can increase necessarily the revenue within the contract. And so we're like, wait, you could do this. Oh, wait, we can? Oh my God, totally. To now I have a champion within group sales, and group sales now is going to food and beverage. It's now going to hotel ops. It's now going, and now you have stakeholders that are champions for you to help streamline and make more money, right? Protect the revenue.
Well, and if you think about it, that same role, that chief of staff role, right, can do that same thing no matter what role they're in, right? So if you're in an IT organization, a law firm, you can look across the law firm and find opportunities for money based on your position and the information that you know on that role. If you're a chief of staff at a legal tech company, you can easily look across and see opportunities to increase sales or to lower costs, or there's lots of, it gives you so much visibility and so much access that there's opportunity everywhere for you to deliver value, which makes you look good and makes your
Exactly.
executive look good, right? Like, which
Mhm.
is the
mean,
goal, right? Yeah.
the cheap of staff is a cheat code. Honestly, if you want to get some money from your project, go to the chief of staff and be like, I have the ear of the CEO, which I tell him or her, where's the money? Give me how do I get the money? They have the relationship and they have the intelligence and they can coach you to figure out how to make your project a success.
Be friends with the chief of staff. That is
Yeah.
what we've learned today.
Yeah.
You're not going to be the
And
chief of staff, be friends with the chief of staff.
Yeah.
BFFs.
BFFs. So thinking about kind of the things like metrics and OKRs and all that kind of fun stuff, where does the chief of staff kind of get involved in those types of things?
They own it usually and they
I
do
was
all
gonna
the
say,
they do all the work.
I'm already owning it, so I'm not getting involved with it. I'm already owning it. So,
So it's kind of your responsibility. Total. Like, are you reporting on it regularly? Like, what do you do? How are you engaged with the metrics, kind of the departmental metrics?
I'm looking daily, right? Financially, I'm looking at, the revenue coming in, the expenses going out, understanding, if we're onboarding new tech or getting ready to strategically, we're thinking about bringing on these two people. Okay, well, what's the capacity, right? I'm looking at every aspect of not just hiring a new person, but all aspects of, well, okay, well, it's going to cost us to bring this person on tech wise to add them into these 4 systems. And now we're not just the HR aspect of the cost, right? But also the operational aspect of the cost, but trying to figure out, okay, how do I save money? How do I protect the money? How do I'm constantly looking at those metrics and those numbers. The second you stop looking at the numbers is the second you're left behind, right? And you're blind. And the second you're blind to the numbers, you're screwed. Excuse my French. You are totally, absolutely jacked. Because how are you able to move quickly and nimbly if you're not looking at the numbers and analyzing and understanding the metrics?
This
And
is
is
where
that pretty traditional, Mackenzie, for chief of staff?
Yeah, it goes back to my thesis that chiefs of staff should look after the leadership systems. And the one part of the system is the KPI dashboard or OKR, like milestones on the roadmap, and saying like, where is it going every single day, every single week, every single quarter. and making sure that the data that goes into the dashboard is clean, common
Yes.
sense, flows in, simple visualization, drive to the decision. Like that is the flow, the process flow to get involved. And I'll throw another pop, culture reference. It's like Moneyball. It's like you got to make sure you have all the data there so that you figure out like where you're putting the people and how they're performing and like what kind of success metrics are you getting out? Are you getting the homers, like home runs and like the hits or not? And why?
Well, especially in the new era of AI too, right? Like clean data. I don't know where we're going with everything with data, but having clean data is kind of part and parcel of the success now, basically.
You don't have clean data, everything downstream is dirty, dirty, dirty.
Yeah.
And you can't make decisions. You can't strategize. You can't operationally function with dirty data. And too many people do it. It's some soapbox of mine.
Yeah, that's hard, by the way. This is some, really unglamorous work to make sure that the data feed is working. It has to be a culture of clean data and accountability to get that clean data up front to flow it through. So obviously the best orgs and the most healthy orgs do that and put money around it. Because otherwise then people come around and they just use the data to make a case for their own pet project. Point fingers like, oh, like the blame should be over there. So you have good data up front, good things will follow.
Yep.
Data can be used for both good and evil, no doubt about it.
Yes. Like Wicked musical.
Exactly. Excellent. Well, so we're getting close to the end. If you have any questions, throw them either in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll jump on those. I think one of the things that we wanted to close out the session on as we were thinking about things is a little bit of a call to arms for folks and thinking about if you're maybe in a de facto role or thinking about growing into a chief of staff role, thinking about what are those characteristics within yourself that make you a good chief of staff, and kind of what are next steps, like what should you be doing? Mackenzie, you want to start?
Yeah, Carl, hit up upon these a little bit earlier. It's like, do you have, the problem solving capability? Like I said, do you have the bias towards action? Can you be really effective with your relationships in the organization? And then also personally, do you want to, skip level in your career? That's selfish, but how do you accelerate your path to promotion? Those are all characteristics around, fantastic chief of staff. And the question is like, oh, okay, how do I get one, right? We're in a really tough job market these days. A lot of people getting laid off that are very talented. So all of it comes back down to creating strong, authentic relationships with your future boss because of the target boss profile that you've created. Maybe even doing a small mini project with them to get to know them. And then once you uncover their, polish areas or zone of incompetence, you make the pitch being like, I can help you and you can help me. And creating the chief of staff job yourself. Obviously, if you're going out into the market, something's been posted, you have to think about your hook and how you stand out meaningfully versus literally hundreds, if not thousands of the other candidates who apply within 24 hours on LinkedIn. So, that would be my response to, the call to arms around, do you have it within you? How do you do it? And then making yourself super unique and telling a compelling story to your future boss.
Are there any classes or trainings or anything like that, Mackenzie, that you would point people towards that are like, I know there's not like a chief of staff class but is there anything that you'd say like, this is the kind of thing that you might want to look into?
Yeah, there's a certification course by Nova Chief of Staff led by CEO Maggie Olson. I also teach a masterclass for job seekers on how to like review your development plan and then market yourself on LinkedIn, essentially. And then there's more, those were the two things I would point to. And then there's also just the school of life, which is just, ask for more projects from your leader and see how far you can go, because the more you do on behalf of your leader, the more they're going to love you, the more you're going to be able to execute, the more you're going to be able to make the case to be their chief of staff.
I love it. Carl?
I would add on to that, look at job descriptions, right? And the duties for a chief of staff that are being posted out there. Maybe you're sticking with your company. You just want to grow into a chief of staff. You want to create that role in your company. well, look to see what the job duties are and start thinking about how do I do that here, right? Now I want to, be more involved in the strategy around finance, right? Okay, well, now start working with your leadership and say, I want to do X, right? 9 times out of 10, a executive is going to not say, no, I don't know. Oh, you want to do extra work? Great. With more money? Sure, I'll let you do that. And that's the selfish aspect, right, McKinsey? Because that's how I was, right? Is I wanted to learn additional things. When I transitioned into legal operations, there were certain skill sets that the Core 12 talks about, right? That I was like, well, I don't really have much experience with, these couple of areas. Well, I just went and then said to my boss, I want to do this. I want to do these additional things. And he's like, okay, sure. I don't have to give you a new title. I don't have to give more pay. Well, it's the short-term sacrifice for me to be able to add those skill sets that continue to propel me along professionally. So I would recommend, in addition to everything you're saying, is to look and start to take an audit, right? Do your own personal audit of your skills and what you're lacking to transition into the role that you want to have. Doesn't matter whatever the role is, but for what we're talking about, chief of staff, see what you're lacking and start building on that to be able to then pitch yourself to sell if you are transitioning out to a different employer. Hey, I've got these 5 additional things. This is why you want to hire me. And lean on your network.
Totally.
That's a huge part. I'll be honest, the job I have now is because my current boss saw me speak at a Consero legal ops conference, and we met at the wine happy hour and just started talking. And somehow we got on the subject of chief of staff as the next career path. And here I am today, a year later. And it's like, it's just because not necessarily being in the right place at the right time, but leaning into my network, right? And demonstrating, hey, I can do this job as chief of staff.
I also heard go to the happy hour. That's
Yeah.
don't skip the happy hour is what I heard in there. Well, the other thing I would say too, whenever I'm like looking at a new role or somebody's asking me about kind of qualifications for something, I'm a big fan of word clouding job descriptions, like taking a whole bunch of job descriptions that are of the same ilk. If you're in legal, I would take legal chief of staffs or banking or something that's very similar, word cloud them and see what the words that pop out are, because that usually tells you where the skills are. And then kind of going back to what I've learned from the two of you today on today's session, really think about what are the weaknesses of the person or the things they hate doing, right? So don't go ask them to take a project on for the things they love doing. If they hate metrics, go ask them to take on the metric stuff, right? Those types of things. Excellent. All right. It looks like we got Lauren's question answered. Any other questions? Throw them in. Otherwise, I'd love to give Mackenzie, you and Carl both a moment to kind of share any closing thoughts that you might have, or tell us about anything that you have coming up that you'd like to tell us about. Carl, you want to start?
Okay, I'll go first. Closing thoughts. I would say, don't be afraid, right? If you are looking to grow into chief of staff, the imposter syndrome is going to hit. We all suffer. And if you say you have never suffered from imposter syndrome, I challenge you on that statement, because we all have a level of that imposter syndrome. But know that, a good chief of staff is everything that we talked about, right? They're a trusted confidant. They're a trusted advisor. They are a problem solver. They're a master organizer. They're a master communication. They are the empathetic, sympathetic arm and voice to leadership, right? Sometimes we don't realize that we are playing that role to our leader as well as to the business, right? It's understanding that, you just need to vent your frustration. All right, I'm your ear. just dump on me. I may not have necessarily the solution to it, and they may not be looking for the solution. They just may want to vent. But it's also that aspect, right? And I can't wait, Mackenzie, for you to create the dating app for staffs and senior leadership to find your perfect match.
Fantastic. Yeah, Indian matchmaking on Netflix, which is a popular show, really gives me a lot of inspiration on how to best make that partnership happen. So maybe something in the works. But the parting thought that I would leave all of you that are watching the replay or watching live today is that I think we have a huge opportunity around defining the discipline of executive operations. We are really in the early innings of this specific business function. The same way that we saw the rise of sales ops, legal ops, sales enablement, all these things, people ops even, we have the same opportunity to define the discipline of executive operations, executive enablement. That's what we're trying to do at Cedar, really thinking about the leadership OS, the operating system that undergirds this entire exec ops function, and then really promote a lot of people into positions of power and get them to become amazing leaders by coming through the office of the CEO, office of the CIO, et cetera. So I'm really excited. I'm really jazzed. Check out some of my writing on LinkedIn and some of my videos on YouTube, really thinking about that leadership operating system and executive operations as a function. There's so much more to come over the next, decades.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for joining us today. That's I couldn't agree more. I think this is the ground floor, and it's the time to get into the elevator because it's going nowhere but up from here. So thank you both for joining us. Thanks to everyone who joined us and anyone who's listening to the playback afterwards. This has been a great session, and looking forward to watching more from you and Mackenzie and Carl coming up. So thank you again.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks, Carl.